Tonight, Virginia becomes the nation's political epicenter. The Democratic candidate and the Republican candidate now both battling over Donald Trump. How did he become the key issue there? We will discuss. Dan Abrams Live starts right now. Welcome to the show. Hi, everyone, and welcome to the show. I'm going to pull out some scripts here. As the Democratic candidate for governor in the state of Virginia is involved in the big political battle. The Democrat, Terry McAuliffe, and the Republican, Glenn Youngkin, are locked in a tight battle in the governor's race, and Donald Trump has become a big focus, with the Democrat, McAuliffe, trying to make this an election about the former president, and the former president speaking at a recent event for the Republican, Youngkin, with less than 3 weeks to go in the contest. Now, a new poll out yesterday shows the race to be a toss-up, as McAuliffe holds a slender lead within the margin of error. Bold-faced names on both sides of the aisle are getting involved. Former President Barack Obama leading a parade of top Democrats headed to Virginia on behalf of Terry McAuliffe. He's set to join the Democratic candidate in Richmond a week from Saturday. And on Wednesday night at a rally in Glen Allen, Virginia, the biggest star in the GOP made his foray into the campaign. Former President Donald Trump made a cameo dialing into an event held in support of Youngkin with radio host John Fredericks. Trump heaped praise on the Virginia Republican and offered his endorsement. But will the former president's involvement help or hurt the comparatively moderate Youngkin? For their part, the Youngkin campaign seems to think it will hinder the cause. The candidate did not appear at the rally on Wednesday, and the campaign has denied being involved with it at all. Maybe that's because of the absolutely absurd nature of the event, which included this moment where an American flag was brought to the Capitol on January 6th, was triumphantly trotted out for the crowd.
I also want to invite Kim from Chesapeake. She's carrying an American flag that was carried at the peaceful rally with Donald J. Trump on January 6th. I ask you all to rise and join us as Mark Lloyd leads us in the pledge.
Face the flag. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America.
All right. Now, look, later on at the rally, the former president gave his stamp of approval to Youngkin, calling him a great gentleman. He added that he thinks Virginia is very, very winnable. Maybe Virginia is very, very winnable for Youngkin, but that comment about voting conflicts with what the president said yesterday when he claimed if we don't solve the presidential election fraud of 2020, which we have conclusively and thoroughly documented, Republicans will not be voting in 2022 or 24. In 2016, Trump lost Virginia to Hillary Clinton by nearly 5 points. In 2020, the former president's losing margin doubled as Joe Biden topped him by double digits. Politically, Virginia is purple, maybe turning blue state. So the election fraud nonsense and glorifying of January 6th can't help Youngkin amongst the independent voters he so desperately needs. Joining us now, a man who knows Virginia politics well, Dave Weigel, national political correspondent for the Washington Post. Dave was at the Virginia rally last night. Dave, thanks for coming on the show. Appreciate it. Was that rally as sort of wacky as it seemed?
Oh, it wasn't very large. It was at a kind of a bar/event venue. A couple hundred folks were there. They were milling around. I mean, not everyone who attended the rally was even in the room for that moment. It lasted really from about 5 p.m. to 9 p.m. And the biggest stars were, beyond the call-in from Trump, were Steve Bannon and the candidate for lieutenant governor, not the candidate for governor. But yes, it did epitomize the sort of politics that Youngkin has tried to straddle and that McAuliffe, every time he sees an opportunity, brings back up. McAuliffe, I think, is correct, and Youngkin's behavior suggests he's correct, that bringing Trump up is a motivator for Democratic voters, whether or not Republicans like it. I saw the same thing covering the recall in California. You can quibble and say, bringing up Donald Trump, that's not the biggest issue facing voters. He's not in the ballot. But he remains a huge motivator for Democrats to turn out. And at this point in Virginia, there are more Democrats than Republicans for the first time in a long time.
So is it fair to say that Youngkin is distancing himself from Trump at this point?
I wouldn't call it distancing. He has criticized him when he's felt that he needs to criticize Trump or something related to the movement. He's a bit more adroit, despite being a first-time candidate, than Ed Gillespie 4 years ago. Remember, Ed Gillespie's running for governor. Some of the same coverage was happening, where people said, well, are Republicans going to find an issue that disrupts what Democrats are doing in the suburbs, and it didn't quite happen. But what the difference with Youngkin is that there is no Charlottesville, which there was in 2017. Ed Gillespie really struggled after the Charlottesville events, after the murder of Heather Heyer, distinguishing himself from a movement that Trump got entangled with. Youngkin has stayed away from those events, but he has appeared at rallies with people, and it's not really 6 degrees of Kevin Bacon. Most Republicans in the country, most elected Republicans, have said something about January 6th. Amanda Chase, who was at this rally last night, who has campaigned with Youngkin, was at the January 6 events. Now, she wasn't breaking the Capitol, but she has a different view than most Virginia voters do about what happened there. Right. And so all of this feeds into what McAuliffe has been running on, because at the same time, Youngkin is trying to portray him as a radical, trying to say that he's going to empower leftists, defund the police activists, things like that. Anytime Trump comes in, it kind of blots the sun out, and that is what voters are hearing about.
Look, you know, one of the things that makes me sort of insane in the media coverage generally is that we like to call everything a bellwether, right? Oh, there's this congressional race, which is going to be a bellwether. And this is going to be a bellwether for what's going to happen in the national race. And what people forget is that in an election like this, it's still a lot about local, meaning Terry McAuliffe made some dumb comments about schools, right? I mean, he talked about at one point that parents shouldn't be the ones telling schools what to teach in schools. And that's been a real big political issue. And so I worry that when we talk about these things as bellwethers, that we ignore all the other things that the Virginia voters may be voting on that don't have to do with Donald Trump.
Oh, that's a good point. And McAuliffe actually has not really backed down from that statement. The way he puts it is that, look, education, if you involve parents in every single decision, if parents have veto power over curricula, over books, then that is not the future that people want. He has defined, I think he's emphasized the more out there protests at school board meetings. Now, there have been parents showing up at school board meetings with legitimate grievances. McAuliffe doesn't really recognize that. He portrays everything that's happening that is flamboyant and wild as the far right. But you're right, those are not the top issues facing Virginians. Honestly, the advantage McAuliffe has is that as governor, he was fairly popular. The economy grew. Youngkin has struggled in trying to argue to people that things are going to fall apart if McAuliffe's reelected. And McAuliffe is, a lot of focus is on suburban Virginia. McAuliffe's done pretty well in the swing part of the state, talking about if the infrastructure bill passes, the resources that are going to come to Virginia. So yes, in the final, it's 19 days for the election, you're seeing a lot of focus on issues that are not front and center for voters. And the reason that McAuliffe remains ahead, if it's narrow, Republicans say their data shows it different. The reason he's doing pretty well, probably he's more popular than Joe Biden in the state, is because of those economic issues, those quality of life issues, where voters have been siding more recently with Democrats in the suburbs.
So let's agree that if Youngkin wins, maybe we'll say it's a bellwether. If McAuliffe wins, who knows what the cause was, because this was his to lose from the outset anyway. Dave Weigel, thank you so much for joining us. Appreciate it.
Good to be here. Thank you.
The Defund the Police movement is basically dead, with almost universal recognition that it's a non-starter. But some still believe that defund the police never meant defund the police. Coming up. Welcome back. After popularizing the term through much of 2020 after the murder of George Floyd, it seems that every major political leader is now distancing themselves from defund the police. In August, the issue was actually put to a vote in the Senate, which voted 99-0 that any city that defunded the police would have federal funds cut. Clearly, Democrats have come to realize that it won't happen on any sort of significant scale, and the public doesn't want it. Former President Barack Obama recognized this before many Democrats were willing to accept the reality.
If you believe, as I do, that we should be able to reform the criminal justice system so that it's not biased and treats everybody fairly, I guess you can use a snappy slogan like defund the police, but you know you've lost a big audience the minute you say it, which makes it a lot less likely that you're actually going to get the changes you want done.
But it seems to some that it's still a definitional issue, that defunding the police is still a good idea, that it's just been misunderstood. The Brookings Institute, a Washington-based think tank, which identifies itself as an independent, nonprofit public policy organization, which, quote, does not take positions on issues, published a piece back in May titled 7 Myths About Defunding the Police Debunked, a sort of fact check on defunding the police in an effort to right the ship and get the public behind that effort. I have to say that I was astonished by some of the so-called myths highlighted in the piece, but joining us now to discuss his work is one of the authors of that piece, Dr. Howard Henderson. He's the founding director of the Center for Justice Research at Texas Southern University. He's a criminologist who's done extensive research on issues of criminal justice. Dr. Henderson, thank you so much for coming on the show. Really appreciate it.
Well, thank you for having me.
Let me ask you, so I'm reading through this piece, and I have to say I hadn't seen the piece until now, even though it was published a while back, about the myths on defunding the police. And, you know, for example, your myth number 3 was that police protect the public from violence was one of your myths. And you talk about how police have trouble tracking down certain criminals involved in violent crimes. And yet I wonder, when you talk about police protecting the public from violence, isn't that what the whole point of a 911 call is to call the police so they can respond and help protect the public from violence?
Well, it's a response to violence, not a protection from violence. And so what we did there was we wanted to raise attention to the fact that there are social conditions that exist that the police have no choice of dealing with. Poverty, for example, low education, for example, socioeconomic status. Those are all issues that are beyond the police's control, but they're held responsible for it.
Right, but a 911 call very often is not a call just to report a crime. It's also to stop something from happening. Someone is breaking into my house. Someone is following me on the road. Someone has done something and I see them in the dark there. I mean, when you say police protect, I worry that articles like this do exactly what Barack Obama was talking about right there, right? You say it's a myth that police protect the public from violence, as if that's some sort of fact check on policing. I mean, you know, it does sound to me, even though you say in myth number 1 that defund means abolish, and your claim is that it doesn't, it does sound like what you're really saying is that it ought to be to abolish the police.
No, that's not what we're saying at all. What we're saying is we need to have the conversation about just the type of policing that we need. Police need to be able to focus on violent crime, not focus on petty offenses. What we're trying to do is raise attention to the fact that we have police spread way too thin, and they need to be able to focus on the most at-risk individuals in our community.
Well, that seems to me to mean you should have more funding, right? I mean, if they're spread too thin, we need more funding for police, not less. I mean, one of the things you raise, and I think it's a fair point, about police with college degrees, and I think that there are a lot of great departments around the country that do require college degrees. Again, that requires more funding. So you're saying they're spread too thin. You're saying that they ought to have college degrees. It sounds to me like what you really mean is we ought to be funding more.
No, what we're saying is putting the funding in the right place. Police officers in many places make an adequate salary. Many police officers do actually have degrees. What we're saying is the research tells us that police officers without college degrees are more likely to be involved in use of force cases. We want the police to be able to focus on what they can focus on because we realize that can save lives.
Yeah. Look, and I think that that is very different in tone, and tell me if I'm being unfair, but that is very different in tone than the piece that you wrote about the myths about defunding the police. I mean, I didn't see anything in this piece talking to me about how this is going to help us better solve violent crimes. This, to me, was an argument for why we should keep using the phrase defunding the police, and people should just understand it better.
Yeah, no, what we were trying to get across was that people need to understand that there's a need for a conversation across the country because defund the police is a bad moniker. We don't understand it. And so people have a problem understanding that issue.
And do you think that you would agree with me, would you not, that the quote unquote defund the police movement is basically dead?
Oh, I think it's obvious that defund the police movement is dead. That's very clear across the country.
Yeah. And And are you disappointed about that?
No, we're not disappointed because we're trying to have the conversation because we realize that this is the first time in modern history we've had a conversation about police allocation of resources.
Right. Look, and I am all open to having discussions a lot about policing. For example, I've said I'm very much against no-knock warrants, for example. I think they're a real problem. And there are other aspects of policing to discuss. I just don't think that the way you framed it in this article that was published by an organization that claims not to take positions on issues was a very fair characterization of, as you put it, some of the complex issues and how we can go about solving violent crime. But let me give you the final word.
Yeah, well, if you look at our conclusion, we made it very clear that no matter what you call it, defund the police, reallocate funding, total reimagination of resources, the research supports a public health approach. What that looks like, we remain to be seen.
All right. Well, it seems at least we're in agreement on certain aspects of this. And this is the kind of conversations that I want to have about this kind of topic and a lot of other topics. Dr. Henderson, thank you for coming on the show. Appreciate it.
Thank you for having me.
Coming up, voter fraud charges filed in the battleground state of Michigan. The Attorney General there moving full force ahead, prosecuting 3 people. Coming up. It is confirmed there was voter fraud in the 2020 election. Yep, and in one of the battleground states, too, Michigan. The Attorney General there announcing Monday that she is prosecuting 3 cases of voter fraud connected to the 2020 election. Earlier this week, Attorney General Dana Nessel announced the charges. It's just not the kind of or scope of voter fraud that some want you to falsely believe was happening in Michigan or elsewhere. These 3 were charged with forging signatures on absentee voting applications and in one case, signing and mailing in an absentee ballot for someone who decided to vote in person. And look at what we're not telling you. We're not telling you if they were Biden or Trump supporters because it doesn't matter. The law is the law. I also don't know. What does matter is that in the rare instances where people actually are committing fraud, they're being caught and charged. 4 people have been charged with voter fraud in Wisconsin, where more than 3 million ballots were cast. The number's almost identical in Arizona. The AP found just 4 cases of possible voter fraud that have led to charges there out of more than 3 million ballots cast. As the Michigan Secretary of State, Jocelyn Benson, put it in a press release on Monday, our election system is secure, and today's charges demonstrate and that in the rare circumstances when fraud occurs, we catch it and hold the perpetrators accountable. These charges also send a clear message to those who promote deceitful claims about widespread fraud. The current protocols we have in place work and protect and ensure the integrity of our elections. But that didn't stop those behind the push to audit the 2020 election in Michigan, where Biden won by more than 150,000 votes. On Tuesday, several hundred people rallied at the state capitol, calling for a private audit, just like the one in Arizona, making the same evidence-free claim we've heard repeated ad nauseum for months now.
Unless we get to the bottom of what really happened in November 2020, we can't go forward.
Except that, of course, we've gotten to the bottom of what happened in 2020. More than a dozen cases worked their way through the courts in Michigan. Not one was deemed credible enough to take any kind of action to throw out the election results. As one judge put it, the suits were never about fraud, but rather undermining the people's faith in our democracy and debasing the judicial process to do so. But that doesn't mean there was no voter fraud. And when it happens, it must be taken seriously. Yes, there were 5.5 million ballots cast in Michigan during the 2020 election. 6 cases now of voter fraud have been brought forward. The facts matter, and you can both believe that there was voter fraud in 2020 and also know that it wasn't close to impacting the outcome. Earlier, I spoke to Paul Egan, who's been all over this story for the Detroit Free Press. Paul, thanks very much for coming on the show. Appreciate it. So what do we know about these 3 people who were charged in connection with voter fraud in the 2020 election?
Well, the Attorney General announced charges against 3 people. Probably the most serious one, I guess you could say, is a person who runs a guardianship company, so legal guardian for incapacitated individuals. And it's alleged that she fraudulently filled out absentee voter applications for as many as 26 individuals that, according to the charge information, she basically used an X to sign a name to get absentee ballots for these incapacitated individuals. In several cases, registered them to vote without their knowledge, and she faces a number of fraud counts alleging that she fraudulently signed names to applications for absentee ballots. A second woman who worked at a nursing home, somewhat similar situation. There it's 3 individuals she's accused of forging their signatures basically to get absentee ballots for them. Now, it's important to understand that in neither of these cases were any fraudulent votes allegedly cast. These situations were detected by local clerks before any votes were cast. Police investigated, and charges were announced on Monday.
Well, that's what I wanted to ask you about. How did they catch them, right? I mean, sort of the question a lot of people ask is, how do people end up getting caught for voter fraud? Do we know how they were able to highlight these particular instances of alleged fraud?
Sure. In the case of The Guardian, according to the information that was put out by the authorities, she actually used an X as a signature to request the absentee ballot. So it caused a red flag. This was not just in one jurisdiction, but it was in a number of different municipalities around Metro Detroit. But the state started getting calls apparently from local clerks saying, this one doesn't look right. And, they ended up putting it all together. The case in the nursing home with the 3 individuals, the woman allegedly just signed names, didn't try to copy their names, but signed their names that weren't their signatures. Now, clerks from prior elections, they also have access to driver's license databases, but they do have at the local clerk's office signatures that they can cross-check these too. And in those cases, they found the signatures didn't match and reported it to the authorities.
Paul Egan, thank you so much for joining us. Really appreciate it.
Thanks for having me.
Coming up, a murder suspect cornered by police at a gas station. He has a gun, and he points it at police as officers rush to try to get people safely out of that store. Coming up. Time for our police cam segment, showing you the dangers law enforcement officers face on a daily basis across the country. Tonight, we're seeing what happened when police in Indianapolis tracked a double homicide suspect to a gas station.
Go! Get on the ground! Get on the ground! Get on the ground! Get everybody get on the ground! Get everybody get on the ground! Get everybody down! Get on down! Come on out, crawl out! Everybody out! Everybody outside! Go outside! Go outside! Go outside! Go outside! Come on out! Come on out! I'm shooting! Come on out! Get your hands up! Let's see those hands! Get on out! Get on out! Get on out! Let's see those hands! Hey, come on! He's on the floor! He's on the floor! Get up! Let me see your hands! Store clerk! Store clerk, get outside! Where you going? I'll shoot you! Shoot, get out!
The Indianapolis Metro Police provided 4 angles from the store's surveillance cameras. The suspect, James Williams, was inside the store for more than an hour with a handgun tucked inside the waistband of his shorts. He walked out, but ran back in as police arrived. Officers got the civilians out as Williams ran to the back of the store. As you saw there, he pulled out his gun, pointed it at the 2 police officers. He opened fire, and he was eventually killed. No officers or civilians were injured. Joining us now to break this down is the police chief, Chachi Paparo, from Yeadon, Pennsylvania. Chief, thanks a lot for joining us. Appreciate it. So we see a man already wanted in a double homicide running into a small store. What is the key there for the police? I would assume number one is getting those other people out of there.
That's the primary goal. I mean, the offender in this incident forces the police to actually have to enter in right after him, knowing that it's in the middle of the day, there's patrons in there, they can't wait outside because it could potentially turn into a hostage situation. So they basically are forced to enter the property in an effort to make sure they can get everybody out and deal with the suspect inside.
I mean, the fact that he was a murder suspect obviously means immediately, you know, this is a situation that we have to take incredibly seriously and be very careful.
Yeah, he basically dictated what was going to happen once he came out and decided to run back into the store. Once he did that, the officers had no choice but to follow in after him, so that they didn't. So they, in effort, basically protected everybody inside and got them out.
All right. It sounded like the suspect said to police that he almost wanted them to shoot him before he pulled the gun. Let's listen again.
I'll shoot you. Shoot, get out.
Wow. Talk about split-second decisions that officers have to make. It's a classic example right there.
It is. The suspect, when officers are involved in a deadly force situation, they're looking for several things before they can actually deploy deadly force. They're looking for the suspect to have an ability to harm them, an opportunity to harm them, and then placing them in jeopardy. And then they have to be in a position where if they don't act, they could be harmed. In this case, the suspect put them in all phases of those preclusions to use deadly force. That's the sad part about it. The suspect brought his own demise on by his actions.
Yeah. So before I let you go, I got to say that I was instructed to refer to you as Chachi instead of
That's
Anthony,
correct.
which is apparently your real name. And I was thinking the police chief there, his name is Anthony, and I'm being asked to call him Chachi. What's up with that?
When I got hired, I looked like I was 12 years old, and one of the old timers named me Chachi from Happy Days, and it's stuck ever since from 1985.
Wow. Scott Baio lives with us forever. All right. Chief, can I call you Chief Chachi?
Yeah, everybody in Yates calls me that.
Is that right? Oh, all right.
Yeah, all the residents know me as that.
All right. Chief Chachi, thanks so much for coming on the show. Appreciate it.
Thanks for having me.
Coming up, the plot thickens. Disgraced South Carolina lawyer Alex Murdaugh arrested at a drug rehab facility, accused now of stealing insurance money. He is still a person of interest in the death of his wife and son. This case gets weirder and weirder by the day. We'll go live to South Carolina up next. We are back. Disgraced South Carolina lawyer Alex Murdaugh was arrested in Florida today for allegedly scamming millions of dollars from his late housekeeper, Gloria Satterfield's family. Remember, this is the guy who first came to national attention after his wife and son were gunned down at their home in June. This is just the latest twist in what is already too outrageous to be a Hollywood script. He's now facing 2 felony counts. He's accused of stealing more than $4 million from Satterfield's sons. Murdaugh managed to secure the more than $4 million from his insurers. He only told the sons about $500,000 and then allegedly never sent them a dime. The Murdaugh family told Satterfield's sons in 2018 their mother tripped over the family dog and fell down the stairs, died weeks later from her lingering injuries. The death was never reported to the Hampton County coroner, who's asked state police to investigate why she was never called to review the death. Murdaugh was taken into custody after his release from a drug rehab center in Orlando. Yes, he was in rehab. Murdaugh went into rehab just over a month ago after he was busted for allegedly trying to get his drug dealer to kill him on the side of the road, part of an alleged life insurance scam to collect $10 million for his other surviving son, Buster. But now his alleged drug dealer, Curtis Smith, is speaking out saying he didn't actually shoot Murdaugh and that Murdaugh wasn't even shot. Smith is facing multiple charges, including assisted suicide, conspiracy to commit insurance fraud. Here is what he said earlier today.
To be clear, does your client maintain utter and complete innocence in this case?
Go ahead.
I didn't shoot him.
Are you innocent of everything?
I'm innocent. If I'd have shot him, he'd have been dead. He's alive. He said, "You gonna shoot me?" I said, "No." He said, "You just got to do it." And he made his move like this. you know, and I just grabbed his arm.
You took the gun.
Shoved it behind him, between me and him, and it went off.
The gun went off. Did it hit him? Did the bullet hit him?
No.
So that story where
There's
he
no
got
blood on me. There's no blood on him.
he didn't get shot in the head.
No.
And the story doesn't end there. Murdaugh, according to his lawyers, is now considered a person of interest in the deaths of his son and wife.
SLED has said from the get-go that Alec was a person of interest. SLED said the next morning, which is still mind-boggling to us, that the public need not be worried about their safety, which I've talked to people who heard that, and first the thoughts were it must have been a murder-suicide. We know that wasn't the case. Then the second thought is it must be some domestic related. And when you look at, domestic violence, who you look at? You look at the husband or father. But SLED's identified Alec as a person of interest. They've never eliminated him as a person of interest. And you would think that if Alec was the one who did it, that SLED would have been able to establish that pretty easily that night.
I mean, I have so many questions about this case. So we're lucky to have Riley Benson with us, a reporter from WCBD News 2 in Charleston, South Carolina, who has been following this case closely. Thank you very much for coming on the show. Appreciate it. Before I talk about what happened with today's arrest, so now we know that Murdaugh's alleged drug dealer is saying that Alex Murdaugh was not even shot. Do we have any sort of medical records, any sort of confirmation that he was shot? Do we know anything about a gunshot wound?
Oh, we know a couple things. We know that there are no medical records that have been released by the hospital, by Murdaugh's attorneys at this point. But what we do have are two conflicting reports from the Hampton County Sheriff's Office, Dan. Now, the first one that was released by the Hampton County Sheriff's Office said there was no visible wound to Alec Murdaugh when he was shot on the side of that Hampton County road. Now, a couple hours later, they released a corrected version of that police report, and it stated that Alec Murdaugh had suffered a major visible injury to his head, which was then corroborated, or his attorneys came out and said that he had suffered a skull fracture, minor brain bleeding, and an entry and an exit wound. Now, again, we don't have any medical records from the hospital that he was life-flighted to in Savannah that weekend.
So wait, do we know that he was life-flighted? I mean, did that definitely happen?
Well, that's coming from his attorneys. That was also confirmed by SLED, that he was indeed life-flighted from the scene in Hampton County. But what we don't know, they never confirmed where he went until his attorneys came out and said that he was flown to Savannah. At first, there was reports that he was going to Charleston, which is about the same distance as Savannah from the area where he was shot. That was the part that wasn't confirmed. We were able to confirm later that he was taken to Savannah by life flight.
Okay, and what about Murdaugh's lawyer saying that his client is now a person of interest in the murder of his wife and his son? Do we know anything more about that?
Well, SLED came out, South Carolina Law Enforcement Division came out a day later and said that Alec was named as a person of interest in this case. Obviously, he was the one who claimed to find his wife and son's bodies that night on the family property. This is the first time that the attorneys are confirming that he indeed is a person of interest in this case, but not entirely shocking, knowing that the South Carolina Law Enforcement Division had came out and said that Alec was a close person of interest in this case back in June, 2 days after his wife and son were found brutally shot on their family property.
All right, so what can you tell us about today's charges?
Well, today's charges stem from a death settlement money that was supposed to be paid out to the former housekeeper, Gloria Satterfield's sons. Now, this happened back in 2018. Alec, at the funeral of Gloria Satterfield, recommended to Gloria's two sons that they hire a close friend of Alec, Corey Fleming, and also an attorney, they were college roommates, to represent the Satterfield estate against Alec Murdaugh. Now, he had said that he was at fault for her death and said that they should hire Corey Fleming to pursue settlement or payment result from her death. They were friends, they take the money, and from there, what we know is that Corey Fleming, Alec Murdaugh, and a banker set up a fake bank account called Forge that would emulate a Forge LLC consulting company that Murdaugh's family law firm uses regularly. From there, Corey Fleming would write checks, and we have got these checks. There are different numbers conflicting from that death settlement. to the bank account. Alec would go and cash the checks out from a P.O. box in Hampton, and he would take that money. He also used this fake bank account to funnel money from his family's law firm. This was founded by his great-grandfather back in 1910. So he's stealing a bunch of money here.
So, and is he a possible suspect in the housekeeper's death? I mean, that's what a lot of people are asking now, is she slips over the dog and falls down the stairs, and then the guy's stealing the money that the insurer's getting. Are they now investigating? They must be actively investigating that as well.
Yeah, this is an open investigation at this point by both the South Carolina Law Enforcement Division, and FBI has been brought in, and we don't know if they're involved in this one or not. But from the story all along is that Alec was not home at the time of Gloria Satterfield's trip and fall accident at the house. The only person home at the time was the son, Paul Murdaugh, now late Paul Murdaugh. So there are questions as to whether or not Paul may have some involvement in that. But as far as Alec being a suspect, that's not something we've heard at this point. But it is an active investigation. As you mentioned, the coroner asked that to be reopened this past summer.
The Satterfield family lawyer putting out a statement today that says since early September, the families are dealing with the betrayal of trust and that their loved one's death was used as a vehicle to enrich others over the clients. It is not over. A very good start to holding everyone accountable who either participated knowingly or breached their duties. The bottom line is no one is above the law. Wow. I mean, this case, when I first heard about this case and I started covering it, I had questions. And I was like, this seems a little odd. Now, I'm even more intrigued because there are so many unanswered questions on this one. So we are certainly going to be covering it. We're certainly going to follow it. And I hope you'll come back on the show and fill us in some more.
I appreciate it. Thank you so much, Dan.
All right. Thanks, Ryan. Appreciate it. Coming up, Joe Rogan defends Tucker Carlson. And then Anna Navarro defends Joe Rogan defending Tucker Carlson. Strange bedfellows, but see how it all unfolds with the clips in tonight's Mediaite Moments. Welcome back. A case that drew attention because of its strange connections to Gabby Petito still has not been solved, but one investigator thinks he can crack it. Marnie Hughes joins us live with a preview of this story on NewsNation Prime tonight. Hey, Marnie, tell us about it.
Hi there, Dan. Well, this one is frustrating and puzzling. Kylan Schulte and Crystal Turner were newlyweds. They were out camping, and then in August, their bodies were found with gunshot wounds. It gets stranger, though. The couple reportedly called friends in the days before their death, saying that they were picking up and moving campsites because there was a creepy man nearby. Well, this case has received a lot of speculation because of its connections to Gabby Petito and Brian Laundrie. The dates they were in Moab, Utah, are similar, and Gabby and Brian reportedly got into a fight right outside of a co-op where Kylan worked. Authorities, Dan, have said these cases are not linked, but there is one private investigator, as you said. He is not crossing this off his list yet. His name is Jason Jensen, and he is joining us live tonight with his theories on this case and also some technology that he is using to try to piece this one together. That's tonight on Prime in just a bit. Dan.
Interesting stuff. Marnie, thank you. Appreciate it.
Yep.
Time now for our Mediaite Moments, where we check in on the day's bias, buzz, and bull in the world of cable news and beyond. There's no question that Joe Rogan is currently one of the most influential stars in media, period. His podcast features guests from all political persuasions and expertise of a whole bunch of people. In a recent interview, Alex Berenson compared Rogan's interview style with Fox News' Tucker Carlson.
One of the reasons, because I don't get into fights in gay that often. The aggressive swinging in hetero bars, I just got very sick of.
I think that was the wrong clip there. But that was an interesting one. And I should point out, as it turns out, and this has nothing to do with anything, the guy who did that interview with Daniel Craig in that piece of sound there, I actually went to high school with him. Wild coincidence on a mistaken piece of video that shows up on the show. And I've got to fill. Let's see if we can get the right clip here. Joe Rogan believes, apparently, that Tucker Carlson. You know what? I don't know if this is going to work now, guys. Do we have the first piece of sound? What? Okay. You know what? So if we don't know what sound bites we have, why don't we do this? Why don't we play whatever we have, and then I'll talk about it coming out.
You wrote this piece in Teen Vogue, which I guess you write for.
Oh, which you
And
guess
you
I
said-
write for? Yeah.
That's
how
so
the
much
world
of
would
this
be
you
different
don't
if it
know.
weren't for
You
humans.
pretend that you know, but you don't know, and you
gotta
bully
disagree
people
with you,
who
sir.
ask
I
you
really
questions.
have to disagree.
Then you
A year
just
ago-
decline to do it? Is that
Hold
what
on,
you're saying? They
excuse
allow
me.
you, but you out of
Excuse-
cowardice refuse to? Like, if you want to have an adult conversation about adult issues, wouldn't you agree that it's helpful not to call names, but to engage with the actual questions? It is. Self-awareness, not your strong suit, but I appreciate your coming on tonight. Thank you. All right, I got to go. You should stick to the thigh-high boots. You're better at that.
That had started with Joe Rogan saying that Tucker Carlson's always civil to his progressive guests, and he doesn't disparage or mock them. But there is a reason that my old friend Tucker Carlson is the top-rated host on all of cable, and what you saw there is partly why. To be clear, most of these clips originally aired over a year or two ago, but that's also because he's had on fewer progressive guests. Joe Rogan also came up on The View this week because CNN's chief medical correspondent Sanjay Gupta sat with him for nearly 3 hours, the merits of which were debated on the show. Anna Navarro eventually weighed in.
And I give them both kudos because a lot of times I feel people go to outlets where they don't agree to pick fights and become clickbait.
It would be terrible to go to outlets to fight and become clickbait, right?
And listen, let me tell you something. Everything you just said is 50 shades of crazy.
So,
listen, I don't
going
care.
back to filing your
I don't care
nails.
what you call me. To me, you're
But guess what?
practically as irrelevant
Officer
as Donald
Singh, well, you
Trump
sure seem to
Jr.
care.
Well,
Officer
no, I don't have to
Singh
care. I don't have to care, and a lot of America doesn't have to care. That's why I am a private citizen, because I realize
And he
that I
was
am not
too
perfect,
at that
and I don't
time.
want my life on a magnifying glass.
2 feet away, I don't need you to scream at me this way.
Abby was, I don't know what you just said, but
I said, don't scream at me, I'm 2 feet away.
I'll read it. You know what?
Tucker and Anna both make for pretty great television, and they're both stars for their own reasons, but I don't know that they're necessarily known for civil discourse. Sorry this whole piece didn't work tonight. Do a better one for tomorrow. Thanks for watching.